Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are going to really try and dismantle a stereotype. I think it's one that lives in the heads of, 90% of the population? When you picture manufacturing, what do you see?
It's almost always the same B-roll footage, right,
Mhm.
in our heads. Smokestacks, sparks flying from a welding torch,
Assembly
the
lines.
assembly lines, and maybe some guy named Bill shaking hands on a golf course to close a 10-year contract.
Okay, exactly, the industrial age aesthetic. But we have a stack of reports here today that paint a completely different and, a much more stressful
A
picture.
very different picture.
We're talking about a reality where a factory's survival depends just as much on its API architecture, its data
Yeah.
telematics, as it does on, raw steel or efficient supply chains.
It's a massive pivot, a huge one. And the research we're looking at today, it really focuses on a specific crisis that this pivot has caused.
The
It's a
crisis.
leadership vacuum,
Yeah.
right at the top, in the C-suite.
We're calling it the battle of the acronyms, CIO versus CTO. And the mission for this deep dive is to really unpack why the role of the Chief Information Officer, the classic CIO, is no longer enough for modern manufacturing.
And why the Chief Technology Officer, the CTO, is a distinct and I would say necessary role that a lot of companies are ignoring at their own peril.
Plus, we're going to look at how mid-sized companies, the ones who maybe can't afford a huge Silicon Valley salary, are solving this with something called the fractional CTO model.
Which is a pretty clever economic hack, actually.
It really is.
But if we zoom out for a second, this entire conversation, it all comes down to one core idea from the source material.
Which is?
The manufacturing industry has crossed a digital Rubicon. You can't go back. The handshake deals on the golf course are not enough anymore.
Okay, let's unpack this because I think for a lot of people, and probably a lot of executives, CIO and CTO, they sound like the same job.
They really do.
Like, isn't that just the computer person? Why do we need two different titles for the person who, fixes the Wi-Fi?
You would think so, and honestly, for a long time, they were treated that way. But the distinction is absolutely critical if you want to understand why some companies grow and others just stall.
So where do we start?
Let's start with the CIO, the Chief Information Officer.
Mm.
This role, it really emerged back in the 80s, and back then it wasn't even called IT, it was called data processing.
Right, the guys in the basement with the magnetic tapes and the mainframes.
Exactly. And so historically, their mandate is inward-facing. They manage the internal operations, the ERP systems, the employee laptops, the email servers, cybersecurity. If you think about it like this, the CIO runs the intranet.
So they're the ones keeping the lights on. Their customer is the employee inside the company.
Yes, precisely. And their success is measured by the bottom line. They are incentivized to reduce risk, to cut costs, and to ensure uptime.
So if the email goes down, you blame the CIO.
You blame the CIO. And because their job is all about stability, they often get this bad rap as the Department of No.
I've heard that term. Yeah. It's the idea that if you go to them with some cool new piece of software, they say no because it might break something.
And to be fair to them, that is their job.
Mm.
Saying yes to new unproven software introduces risk, and their entire paycheck depends on killing risk. They are the goalies.
Okay, so that's the defense, a great analogy. Now, contrast that with the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer.
Right, so this role didn't come from the factory floor or the corporate basement. It came from Silicon Valley, from SaaS companies.
Okay.
Their mandate is outward-facing. They aren't building systems for employees. They are building products for customers.
So if the CIO runs the intranet.
The CTO runs the internet. They are the architects of the top line. Their success isn't measured by how much money they saved on server costs.
Right.
It's measured by how much revenue they generated through digital products, through market share, and through product innovation.
That is a huge psychological difference. One is playing defense, the other is playing offense.
And that is exactly where the friction comes in. The report we looked at, it cites a Gartner statistic. 42% of companies experience significant friction between these roles.
Wow, almost half.
Almost half. Because their goals are structurally opposed. It's stability versus innovation.
It makes sense. But okay, if I'm a manufacturer and I've got my CIO keeping the factory running smoothly, why is that suddenly not enough? We've been making widgets for 50 years with just a CIO. What changed? Why is this so urgent now?
The customers changed. The sources refer to it as the Amazonification of B2B.
Everyone wants that prime experience,
Yeah.
even if they're buying a forklift.
Precisely. We are seeing an unprecedented structural realignment. The people buying industrial equipment today, They aren't the old guard anymore. They are millennials and Gen Z.
And they do not want to call a sales rep and talk about the weather.
They hate calling sales reps.
Yeah.
The data here is, well, it's staggering. 94% of B2B buyers prefer online shopping or self-service.
94%.
And we are not talking about buying office supplies or printer paper here.
No, this was the stat that made my jaw drop. The report mentions that 39% of buyers are willing to spend over $500,000 in a single online transaction.
And it goes further. 11%.
Okay.
11% are willing to spend over $5 million without ever meeting someone face-to-face.
$5 million. You just click, add to cart, checkout. That requires a massive amount of trust.
An incredible amount of trust in the digital interface.
Yeah.
And this is the aha moment, right? Buyers are trusting digital infrastructure with massive sums of money. So if your digital experience is clunky, or if you force them to call for a quote because your website is just a brochure,
They're gone.
they will just go to your competitor who lets them click a button.
And this ties into that concept of servitization from the source material, doesn't it? It's not just selling the product anymore.
Right. It's shifting from selling a product to selling a service. Think about a massive industrial machine. Now, it has IoT sensors just streaming data telemetry back to the manufacturer.
So the machine literally tells you when it's about to break.
Exactly. Predictive maintenance. You are selling the fix before the machine even breaks. There's the problem.
That's that.
A traditional CIO who's focused on keeping the internal email server secure is generally not equipped to build the complex data pipelines required for this. To ingest millions of data points from sensors and turn that into a customer-facing product.
Because that's not IT anymore. That's product engineering.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the domain of a CTO.
So, okay, the board of directors sees this. They see the demand for a digital experience. They say, we need an e-commerce store. We need to capture those $5 million clicks.
Right.
And usually they turn to their CIO and say, hey, just add a plug-in to our existing system.
And that is the trap. That is where so many of these digital transformations just completely fail. They treat e-commerce like a bolt-on to their legacy systems.
But why doesn't that work? I mean, Shopify exists. I can set up a store in an hour. Why is it so hard for a manufacturer?
Because manufacturing isn't retail. You're not selling T-shirts where you just pick a size and a color. You're dealing with something called CPQ.
CPQ.
Configure price.
Quote. Okay, break that down for me.
Imagine you're buying a complex tractor or a custom HVAC system for a skyscraper. You can't just put one tractor in the cart.
No.
You have to configure it. And that configuration is bound by physics, by engineering rules.
Right. You can't put the heavy-duty engine on the lightweight chassis or the whole thing collapses in the field.
Exactly. You need what's called a constraint-based configuration engine. A CIO manages the ERP, which is just a database of part numbers. A CTO builds an engine that understands engineering logic in real time.
So it prevents the customer from building something that physically cannot exist.
Yes. And pricing isn't simple either, right? It's not just a sticker price.
No, I imagine not.
It's incredibly complex. You have tariffs, raw material costs fluctuating, volume discounts, customer-specific contracts. A CTO has to architect a system that calculates dynamic pricing in milliseconds.
And if you try to bolt this onto a legacy ERP system, like an old SAP or Oracle,
you get what the report calls architectural paralysis.
It's too slow, the spinning wheel of death while the customer waits for a price.
It's too slow, and it's too rigid. And this brings us to the big technical debate in the report: monolithic versus composable architecture.
This sounds fancy, but I love the analogy they used in the notes.
The Lego analogy.
Yes. So the old way, the monolith is like a giant block of stone, right?
Exactly. If you want to change the shape of the window on your statue, you have to chisel the whole block. It's risky. You make a mistake, you might crack the whole foundation.
So that's your legacy ERP. If you try to change the checkout flow, you might accidentally break the accounting system.
You might crash the whole factory. But the CTO way is composable.
Legos.
It's like Legos.
Yep.
You have one block for search, one for pricing, one for inventory. They're all independent, but they talk to each other through APIs.
So if I want to swap out my search engine for a better one,
you just swap out that one brick. You don't have to rebuild the entire castle. This is called MACH architecture microservices. API first, cloud native, headless. It lets you update your storefront without taking the factory offline.
which seems pretty crucial if you're trying to move at the speed of the market. But here's the rub.
The cost.
The cost. We're talking about high-level architecture, machine learning. The people who know how to do this, real, experienced CTOs, They are expensive.
Incredibly expensive.
Oh.
A full-time CTO from Silicon Valley, you're looking at a $300,000 base salary. And that's before bonuses, equity benefits. The report estimates the total cost is around $480,000 a year.
And for a mid-market manufacturer, that is a lot of margin. That's $500,000 for one person.
It's often completely unjustifiable. So what happens? They don't hire one. They stick with the CIO. They try to patch things together.
And they slowly lose market share.
Exactly. Which brings us to the solution, the fractional CTO.
This is a fascinating economic shift. So a fractional CTO is an executive who serves on a retainer, part-time. But, and this is key, they are not just a consultant.
Yeah.
What's the difference? Because consultant usually means someone who charges you by the hour, gives you a PDF report saying everything's wrong.
And then leaves before the real work starts.
Right. Drive-by management.
A fractional CPO integrates into the leadership team. They have a badge, so to speak.
Yeah.
They're on the org chart. They're there for the long-term strategy. But they split their time between a few non-competing companies.
So you get the $500,000 brain for a fraction of the price.
Exactly. The report cites costs between, say, $3,000 and $15,000 a month. That's a 40 to 70% savings compared to a full-time hire.
That is massive. It basically democratizes that high-level tech leadership.
It lets a mid-sized company punch way above its weight class.
Yeah.
They can get the same architectural vision as an Airbus or a Walmart, but at a price they can actually afford.
Yeah. So walk me through how this actually works. A fractional CTO walks into a factory on a Tuesday. What do? The report outlines a 4-step cycle.
Okay, step one is always discovery. They have to audit the mess. And believe me, it's usually a mess.
Legacy debt.
Legacy debt, spaghetti code, security holes. But the most important part of discovery isn't just looking at the code, it's translation.
Translation.
The fractional CTO translates between the business executives who want revenue and the internal IT department that fears change.
They're the diplomat.
A technical diplomat. They explain to the IT team that this new architecture isn't going to replace them. It's going to stop them from having to put out fires all day.
Okay, what's next?
Step two is the roadmap. This is where they make the hard calls. Monolith or microservices, AWS or Azure. They break that decision paralysis that so many companies get stuck in.
Because they've done it before.
They've made these choices 10 times before. They can say, we're doing this, and here's exactly why.
Then comes implementation.
And this is critical. They don't just write the plan. They lead the engineers. They establish agile cultures, DevOps pipelines. Basically, they bring modern software practices into a traditional environment.
So they teach the team how to ship code every week instead of every 6 months.
Exactly. And finally, step 4 is scaling.
Right.
Which is keeping the thing running and profitable, watching the telemetry, the analytics, and making sure your cloud bills don't just skyrocket into orbit.
Yeah, you hear horror stories about that.
It's very easy to accidentally spend $10,000 a month on cloud servers if you don't know what you're doing.
So it sounds great on paper, but does it actually pay off? At the end of the day, the board wants ROI. They don't care about Agile if it doesn't make money.
The data is pretty compelling. The report mentions companies with fractional tech leadership report on average 18% higher revenue growth and a 15% increase in profitability.
18% is significant. Where is that money coming from?
Two main buckets. First is reduced customer acquisition cost, or CAC. When you have a good digital portal, you get organic traffic. SEO starts to work. You aren't paying a sales rep to fly across the country just to take a routine order.
In the second bucket.
Lifetime value, LTV. This is my favorite example from the report. Imagine a customer at a construction site. It's 2:00 a.m. A critical part breaks.
The panic scenario.
Total panic. If that customer can log into your portal on their phone, identify the exact part, and reorder it in 3 clicks,
These are yours for life.
you own them. Convenience is incredibly sticky. If reordering is a hassle, if they have to wait until Monday to call someone, they'll shop around, 1 click, and they're yours.
Let's ground this in some real-world examples from the sources. They mention a company called SRMB Real Build.
Yes, a construction startup. This is a classic grit meets code story. They deal with steel, cement, very physical things. But they used a fractional CTO to build a platform to manage complex credit and inventory across all their warehouses.
And they use modern tech for it, right? React and Node.js.
Exactly. The kind of tech stack you'd see at a startup in San Francisco, but applied to construction materials. It let them handle complex B2B workflows that legacy software just couldn't touch.
Then there's Valtech's Gear Accelerator.
This is a perfect example of that composable architecture we talked about. They used a platform called Commerce Tools.
which is headless commerce.
Right. They built a system that exposed the bill of materials,
Mm.
the BOM, directly to the customer.
And why does that matter?
Well, imagine you have a machine with 5,000 parts. Finding the right screw to replace is a nightmare. This system lets the customer see an exploded diagram on their screen, click the specific part, and order it instantly.
Wow. It automates aftermarket sales.
It completely automates it, and it frees up the sales engineers. Instead of acting like librarians looking up part numbers for angry customers, they can focus on selling the next big machine.
That is huge. That's finding money in the couch cushions, but at an industrial scale.
It is. And we also see Tactin and MindCloud mentioned as examples of successful CPQ. They're the engines that make that configure-to-order model possible.
So, okay, we've covered the identity crisis, the massive market shift, the technical nightmares, and the fractional solution. What is the big takeaway here?
The big takeaway is that the manufacturing industry has fundamentally changed. Physical product superiority is no longer enough. You can make the best tractor in the world,
Yeah.
but if buying it is a headache, or if I can't get parts for it easily online,
You'll lose.
you will lose to the company that offers a better digital experience.
The digital experience is the product.
Exactly. And to build that, you need the right leadership. You need a CIO to protect the bottom line and keep the ship floating. That role is still vital. But you absolutely need a CTO, whether full-time or fractional, to architect the top line and steer the ship toward new revenue.
And trying to make one person do both jobs.
Conflating those two roles is a recipe for failure.
It's about recognizing that software isn't just a cost center anymore, it's leverage.
It is the ultimate operational leverage.
So here's the thought we want to leave you with today. The report calls it architectural decision paralysis. There are manufacturers out there right now hesitating to adopt a CTO model because of the cost. They are looking at that salary line item and they're flinching.
But while they hesitate, their competitors are building.
Exactly. If you are hesitating, you are likely losing market share to a competitor who views software not as a cost, but as a weapon. So the question is, are you willing to invest in the digital future, or are you content to become the analog past?
That's the question every board member needs to ask at the next meeting.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll catch you on the next one.